Okay, so welcome, Alastair. Welcome to Stolaroid Stories. It's an honor for me to have you on my show and to talk to you today about business, the world of business, the world of starting a business project because you are, I believe, what should I say, a successful entrepreneur, digital entrepreneur. What would you say?
Well, firstly, thank you very much for for having me on and for that very kind introduction. I don't think I would consider myself to be successful, but I had some success. So I will be very happy to share the very large quantity of mistakes that I've made along the way, share the few things that have worked for me, and hopefully people who are listening to this can take from that what they want.
Cool. Yeah, so you're the host and the creator of Leonardo English,
Correct.
correct?
Yes.
So, can you tell us about this business project that you started in 2019, right?
Sure. So it was almost 4 years ago, actually. It was, in fact, well, I had various different starting dates for it, which I'll explain later. But I started about 4 years ago, and the idea was to create a business that made interesting podcast, interesting audio resources. So the business is called Leonardo English, and our flagship podcast is called English Learning for Curious Minds, and that is a podcast aimed at intermediate to advanced, independent, curious English learners. So people who are often, returning to English slightly later on in life, people who have had not such a positive experience of learning English at school, and people who don't necessarily want to go to a language school or have a private teacher or those kind of things. So we really have a very wide range of different types of people who listen to the show. But yeah, we've been going for 4 years, been making 2 episodes a week ever since I first started. So that makes it, I was writing this morning, episode number 430 or something. So it's quite a lot now. It's funny to look back and see that actually if you do something consistently for a long period, you end up with quite a lot of stuff. So yeah, that's me.
Yeah, and the podcast, I came across your podcast in 2021 or 2022, I can't remember. Um, and it's amazing. I mean, it's interesting. It's very interesting because you basically tell stories about anything really, about curious facts. I remember listening to one about the air conditioning. How did we start? How the air conditioning was invented?
That's one of my favorite
Then
ones.
there was okay. So how did you how do you do your research? So can you tell us a little bit about how you make the episode, how you do your research, and how you come up with stories?
Sure. So I guess the first step is to come up with an idea of something that people might be interested in listening to. And lots of people have asked me how I come up with the ideas for the episode. And really there's no sort of great science or logic to it. It's literally things that I think would be interesting for me to learn about. So I it's kind of selfish really. I just approach it from the point of view of what would I like to learn about? And I can use this opportunity to do that research, learn about it myself if it's something that I don't know much about already, and then kind of tell the story of that in an interesting way. So sometimes it can be something like air conditioning, right? Which is it's not a person, it's not an individual, it's not a country, it's not a historical event. It's something that that exists all around us, something that lots of people are familiar with, but they perhaps don't know exactly where it comes from. So there are things a bit like that. Then there are the stories of historical events or people's lives. things that people probably have heard about, and perhaps know in the back of their mind, that's an interesting story, or that person lived an interesting life. But perhaps they don't know the ins and outs of what happened. So I try to tell those stories in a way which is, engaging, historically accurate, and a fun, kind of concise story for people to listen to. So each episode is kind of a maximum 25 minutes, really. Most of them are around the 20 minute mark, which I think is a kind of decent enough time that you can get into a story or an idea, get a decent sort of understanding of it without kind of without getting kind of too much into the weeds. So it's always a bit of a challenge trying to get the balance right between including all the possible detail on a subject and telling a story that someone might want to listen to. And I quite often get messages from people saying that you did an episode on this, but you didn't mention X, Y, or Z. And quite often, firstly, I love getting those messages, because quite often they're like, okay, I should have actually mentioned that. That would be a good thing to have mentioned. But in many other cases, I'm thinking, okay, that's an interesting point, but it didn't quite fit in with the rest of the story, or it wasn't quite as important, I felt, as some of the other things that deserve to be mentioned in the episode. So it's always a real balancing act to get the right mix between kind of storytelling and factual accuracy.
Yeah. So you use those stories to help learners of English, adult learners of English. I know that you have a subscription, like a membership. Tell us a little bit about that, because how can one learn by listening to a podcast? So how do you use your podcast to help learners?
So I can kind of go back a few steps and talk about I guess how I came up with the idea, which will naturally lead, I guess, to the how to use it from a learning point of view. So
Sure.
My background and my approach to what I wanted to create was that I'd always found it very valuable to kind of listen to something with the transcript provided, and a very easy way to check words if I needed to, without having the transcript in my native language, without having huge vocabulary lists, but having that combination of listening plus potential reading, plus the kind of the tools that I needed to turn something from just like an interesting piece of content to listen to into something that I can actually learn and improve my language skills from. So what I did with the podcast is, when I first created it, I just had a very simple transcript on the website, and people could, they could pay a small monthly fee to have access to all the transcripts, and then some bonus episodes as well. Now it's improved quite a lot. It's come on quite a lot since then. So there's like interactive transcripts. You can hover over different words. We kind of define between like 50 and 150 different words or expressions that are more advanced words or expressions per episode. And there are like study packs as well. So the idea behind the podcast is that you can listen and kind of learn with it, I guess perhaps more passively. You can just listen to it as an interesting thing to listen to. But if you would like to kind of, I guess, turn it from something that's an interesting listening resource to something that actually becomes more didactic, then there's the opportunity to do that.
Okay, so this is the project. So you've described the project. I'm here today. I mean, I would like to ask you today the business side of this. So, how did you come up with an idea and decided that idea could be useful to the world, or to your audience, really, to your target audience, which basically is non-native English speakers or learners of English. How did you come up with that and thought, I can start a project, a profitable project that I can, monetize? Like, did you expect this project to work out at the beginning of your business journey, or were you just trying things and see what happened, what could happen?
I guess I hoped it would work out, but what I did is I set myself a target of saying if in 3 months, nothing happens, there are no positive signs that this is something that anyone wants, then I will at least have satisfied that curiosity. I won't be thinking what would have happened if I had tried that. So I set myself 3 months and thought, I'm going to try this. Let's see what happens. And it turned out that there were enough signs that it wasn't a kind of it wasn't listened to by tens of millions of people all over the world, and it was all over the news after a month. Far from it, but there were enough promising signs that I thought, okay, this is something that I want to continue to pursue doing. And maybe we can talk about this a bit later on, but I think podcasts tend to be something that grows slowly over time. And that's even the case for the most successful sort of US big name podcasters, that it's never really a case of just start something and then immediately they're top of the charts, unless they have some big New York Times or something like that behind them. But for most independent podcasts, it's a case of it's a long slog. It takes a while. So I had seen enough signs that I thought it was worth keeping on going. And in terms, sorry, I realized I didn't answer your first question, which was about how did I actually come up with the idea. I guess there are loads of podcasts for English learners, loads of YouTube channels for English learners, loads of stuff for English learners. Right? There's, I guess as a potential English learner, you're completely bombarded with options. You can learn American English, Australian English, British English, grammar, pronunciation, all these sorts of things, and there's just so many different options. But what I couldn't see was exactly what I was trying to create, something that kind of allowed people to learn English through learning weird and kind of wonderful things about the world, through fun stories. There are sort of podcasts or YouTube channels and stuff like that tell you stories, fictional stories. There wasn't anything that I could see where someone could learn about real life stuff. So I thought, well, I'm going to try and create that because that is something that I personally would have been interested in. So my background, quite a while ago, but I studied languages at university. I now live in Malta, which is a place that lots of people come to teach English and learn English. And lots of my friends are non-native speakers. And I approach this from the point of view of thinking, as a language learner myself, this is something that I would want to listen to. Now, there are however many hundreds of millions or billions of people who are actively doing something about their English. Even if just a tiny percentage of those people have a similar perspective to me, then that will be more than enough people to listen to this, to listen to what I'm making, and to turn it into a viable business.
You said you saw enough signs. What were those signs?
So the number of people listening to it just continued to increase, and then I think even within a month, I think something like 20 days after launching, with only 5 different episodes, and also a really rubbish website, rubbish product, you know, the kind of thing that I probably wouldn't have paid for. People started paying for it. People started subscribing and becoming members. And this is not my mother, but genuine people. And I thought, okay, well, if people are paying for this already, and it's in a really unfinished state, it's in a state that I'm kind of semi-embarrassed about, and there is a relatively small audience. If I can continue to grow the audience, if more and more people listen to it, and I continue to make the learning experience better and better, then logically, if you just kind of keep on going up from there should be more and more people who pay, and it turns into a business that can sustain me and a small team. So that was the kind of sign that I saw. Yes.
Okay. So you saw some engagement, but did you promote your product? So I say product because I think this could apply to any business project. I don't know if you agree or not, but when you have a product or a service, in your case, it's a podcast, but it could be anything else. I mean, it could be something else like, I don't know, a TV program or an editing service. Would you agree that this applies to any product or service?
Yes, that you need to promote it in some way, otherwise no one will know about it.
Okay. So how did you promote it at the beginning? Because you said I gave myself 3 months. Did you promote it during those 3 months?
Yes, I promoted it in some successful ways and some really unsuccessful ways. And I think that's, if we're talking about the few lessons of business that I feel semi-qualified to impart to your listeners, it's that you can quite often try something and think that doesn't work, and therefore my idea is rubbish or my product is rubbish. But often you're just talking to the wrong people. Like when I first started this, I saw that there were hundreds of different Facebook groups with people learning English and wanting to kind of chat about English and that kind of stuff. So I posted in lots of those groups, and the response was pretty rubbish, to be honest. So many people would say, "What's a podcast? And how do I listen to this?" Even though the link was there, and I realized that was just the people who are listening to the show now. That's not where they were, and instead I started writing a lot of content on the blogs, and I started kind of writing more detailed stuff, and many more people started coming in through that. So that people kind of finding out about the podcast through the articles I was writing. I kind of worked with a few actual podcast apps to promote the podcast there, and that kind of got the ball rolling a little bit. And the natural thing about having a podcast, I guess this is true also about having a YouTube channel or an Instagram page or something like that, is that these platforms or apps will give you some inbuilt distribution. So a thing I've never actually spoken about before, I think, is that when I first launched what is now the podcast of English Learning for Curious Minds, it wasn't actually a podcast. It was just audio files on my website, because I thought that having a podcast would kind of cheapen it in terms of people not necessarily wanting or being used to paying for podcasts, but being happier to pay for web content, that kind of stuff. And in fact, it was a friend of mine, a Colombian friend here in Malta, who said, you're just being an idiot, why don't you put it on podcast channels? And immediately after I did that, you get a boost from being a podcast. People can find you on Apple Podcasts or Spotify and all that kind of stuff. So if I hadn't followed that advice, I probably, would not be having this conversation, because I would have packed it in. There wouldn't have been anyone who was able to find it, really. So the good thing about having a podcast is, to a certain extent, you do get some of that inbuilt distribution, so people can find you. Although, yeah, I thought was you have to be actually continuing to make content. People have to continue to subscribe to your show and things like that. Otherwise, yeah, you won't come up in search results.
Yeah. You said also that you couldn't see something like you saw many podcasts for learners of English about fictional stories, but you couldn't see what you then made. So you noticed a gap in the market, correct?
Yes, I guess so. Yeah.
Okay. So do you think that to be successful or to launch a successful product or service, do you think there should be a gap in the market, or you could even create something that it's already there. Other people are doing it. Other people are offering this product or service, but still be successful.
Sure.
I don't know if it's Is it
Yeah,
my
yeah. I mean,
question clear?
if you look
Okay.
at, I don't know, the number of different software that exists to send emails, right? There must be,
Yeah.
hundreds of those, and yeah, I'm sure they're all doing very well. As some of them are slightly different. The pricing is slightly different. If they're a carbon copy of the next one, then they're probably not going to do so well. But as long as you're serving one particular customer slightly better or perhaps slightly cheaper than someone else, then as if the size of the potential market is large enough, then you should be okay. I mean, with the case of English language creation, let's say content creation, there are so many people doing similar kinds of things, right? I'm sure if you went to YouTube now and Googled how to improve your English pronunciation, you'd find 10,000 videos, and most of them would say the same thing. But especially with something like a podcast or a YouTube channel, I think what people are connecting with is the person delivering that in a way that with software or other products that not connecting with quite so much. So people are sort of buying into the personality, and I guess that's a good and a bad thing, right? Because you can whether you like someone or not, whether you feel some kind of natural affinity towards them, is kind of uncontrollable, right? It's you have
Of course.
a natural sense of this person seems legitimate. I trust them. I like the way that they're explaining stuff. Or actually, this person is, is not exactly the kind of person I want to spend my mornings listening to. So, I've completely lost my train of thought. But differentiation, that's right. So your question was about how whether you have to kind of spot a gap in the market. I think as long as you're doing something slightly different, and it can be better, maybe it's cheaper if there's a price involved. But I think if there's a large enough market and you're doing something slightly different that you think will appeal to a certain type of person, then you'll be completely fine. I mean, I learned about a guy the other day who I think just makes YouTube content for people passing what I think is the Duolingo English test. I didn't even realize there was a Duolingo English test, but it is something. And I think he's built a very large business based on that particular niche. So if you if you want to take the Duolingo English test, then that is the person that you follow. And maybe he sort of saw that gap in the market and thought, maybe there are some people making that kind of content, but I think I can make it better. I can be more, I can do a better job of actually teaching people how to do it, or I can be more entertaining, or I can cover areas that other people have not covered. So I think as long as you're not just trying to completely replicate what someone is already doing, then give it a go.
Yeah, because it's actually impossible, right? Because you're not them. So I can't be, I can't start my own Leonardo English my English for Curious Mind podcast, because I'm not you, right? So we're all different. And as you said, people also buy the person behind the project.
Mm.
Um, but I'm wondering, um, you talked about the niche. So you've created something that appeals to one group of people. So people who are curious about the world and people who want to improve their English, people who like listening to podcasts. Um, but what if you get bored? So what if one day you get bored of making, this podcast, because you've already recorded 500 episodes, and you're like, I'm sick of this. Like, I know people like it, but I can't take it anymore. What would you do then? I mean, what would you do then? Should you continue, or should you switch because you don't like it anymore?
Well, it's a good question, and I'm not going to lie and say that there have never been days that I thought like, oh God, I don't want to like write or record another episode. Also, I mean, as I mentioned, I live in Malta, which is a kind of 24/7 construction site, and fortunately, we found one of the rare moments where there's not a drill outside or some kind of terrible noise. So for quite a while, I was recording in the middle of the night, kind of between like 2 and 4 a.m., which clearly is not a huge amount of fun. So there have certainly been days where I'm like, oh, this is a very difficult way of making a living. And if the day comes where I'm like, actually, I cannot do this anymore, clearly that is problematic. But to be honest, the kind of nature of I guess the business I'm trying to build, where we're just kind of making interesting stories about interesting things. These are almost things that I would be very happy to just spend hours on Wikipedia and like reading articles and books about anyway. So it's kind of what I would be doing in my free time if I had that kind of free time. So it doesn't always feel like work, like a slog to me. And that was kind of one of the reasons that I wanted to start this, because it was a fun thing to be doing with my days. So I've not felt that quite yet. But if I do, I will let you know.
Okay.
I don't know,
I think.
it's an interesting question, because clearly for anyone who has a podcast, or you could probably also say a YouTube channel, which is all about them, there is the question of, if you have if we take the example of an email service, email sending service, like a MailChimp or something like that, then there is no person behind them. Clearly there are people behind it, and people know who the CEO is and that kind of stuff, but they're using it because of the service, because of what it does, rather than the people who are coding it up and creating it. Whereas clearly with a podcast or for a YouTube channel, it's different. If you remove the person from it, then a lot of people who follow that will not be so interested if it's taken up with someone else. Maybe that person will be better in a different way, but they won't be the same person. So I'm sure that's one of the reasons why, compared to other businesses, things like podcasts and YouTube channels are quite difficult to sell, because that's just, people follow the individuals rather than the business itself.
Yeah, so you need to be able to promote yourself, and not to be ashamed, like that you're promoting yourself. Because some people, we use the word solopreneurs, so it's another fancy word, I think, for freelancers. Um, they they don't like. They need to learn how to sell themselves, how to promote themselves. Did you have that ability before you started this podcast or this project, or did you learn it by doing?
To be honest, I'm still a bit embarrassed to promote myself. And that's why I don't really. I mean, it's the kind of thing that I know that doing things like more interviews like this and those sort of things, collaborations with people would be something that would be helpful in terms of growing the show and therefore the business. But
Yeah.
I'm always a little bit a little bit nervous about doing this, and so you ask me, I'm clear, I'm very happy to be here, but it's the kind of thing that I still feel a bit nervous reaching out to people sometimes. And in fact, that's why I don't really do it so much. And I think also lots of people, myself included, feel like you don't really have an authority on anything. What would people want to learn about from you? And sometimes it's only having these kind of conversations that you think, maybe there is something that someone somewhere can take from this conversation, just a little nugget that makes someone think about something a little bit differently. I mean, I listen to lots of podcasts myself, and in lots of the interview podcasts that you listen to, maybe there's like one or two things that you take from a conversation. You think, okay, I'll remember that. That's useful for me to think about in my business or my life. But a lot of it is just it's just waffle, a lot of kind of hot air. So yeah, maybe I should stop waffling.
No, no, no. It's all very interesting. I wanted to ask you about the. I don't know if it's a philosophy or a belief that comes from Derek Sivers. Are you familiar with Derek Sivers?
To a certain extent, yes. Not as familiar
Okay.
as you are, I believe.
Yeah, no, I'm a big fan of Derek. I like his approach to life and the way he thinks. But in a nutshell, he was the founder of CD Baby, which was the largest music distribution service for independent musicians in the 90s. Then he sold his company. And on his blog, he says, maybe I'll read the blog. I'll read what he says, and you can tell me. We can discuss. You can tell me what you think of this. So Derek says, for the first time in my life, I had made something that people really wanted, which basically was his CD Baby company. Before that, I had spent 12 years trying to promote my various projects, trying everything marketing approach, networking, pitching, pushing. It always felt like an uphill battle, trying to open locked or slamming doors. I made progress, but only with massive effort. But now, wow, it was like I had written a hit song. A songwriter can write 100 songs, then suddenly one of them really resonates with people and becomes a hit. Who knows why? It's not that it's necessarily better, but through some random circumstance or magic combination of ingredients, people love it. And then this is, I think, we are getting to the main point. Once you've got a hit, suddenly all the locked doors open wide. People love the hit so much that it seems to promote itself. Instead of trying to create demand, you are managing the huge demand. So, what's the lesson learned here? We've all heard about the importance of persistence, but I had misunderstood. Success comes from persistently improving and inventing, not from persistently doing what's not working. Nearly the end. We all have lots of ideas, creations, and projects. When you present one to the world and it's not a hit, don't keep pushing it as is. Instead, get back to improving and inventing. Present each new idea or improvement to the world. If multiple people are saying, wow, yes, I need this, I'd be happy to pay you to do this, then you should probably do it. But if the response is anything less, don't pursue it. Don't waste years fighting uphill battles against locked doors. Improve or invent until you get that huge response. What I would like to ask you is, first of all, how do you know if something is a hit or not? Because you gave yourself 3 months, okay? And I guess that you reason that, okay, in those 3 months, I'm going to check, I'm going to see if this is a hit or not. Um, is this what you did? I think you answered this question before. Um, the question is, how do you know if something is going to be a hit or not? If you can know it.
So yeah, it's I guess it's the question that anyone starting their own business needs to figure out, right? I think there's, I mean, if you're seeing absolutely no signs of traction whatsoever, if you're putting whatever you've created into the hands of people who you think are your potential customers, and they're saying, this is not something that we want or that we're willing to pay for, and you know when that happens, I think it's not a question of saying, okay, I failed. It's a question of saying, why is this not meeting your requirements? Is it because of X, Y, Z? And then you can go back and say, right, I've taken on your feedback. Is this now something that you want? And if they're still saying no, then perhaps the problem that you thought was the problem is not so much of a problem at all. On the other hand, if you're coming back and they're starting to be more and more interested, and you can get someone to pay for something or use something that is, as you know, imperfect and full of problems, then I think that is a good sign that you are onto what might be something. So that's kind of my approach with this, is that I knew it was really bad. I was not happy at all with what I'd created from a kind of technical point of view, and even listening back to the first few episodes, I kind of cringe. I think this is really, really not good, because it was the first time I'd ever done this. So I figured if I can get better at actually the storytelling element of it, if I can get better at the research, and I can combine that with a better kind of learning experience on the site, and people are already paying for it, then presumably that should it should only go up from there. I think when you find that you're fighting an uphill battle is when you can continue to have those conversations, and people just are saying no, or they're saying like, maybe I'd be interested in paying for it, but I just they're not sort of super excited about it. I think the other important distinction to make is, if we're talking about something like a kind of content creation business, podcast, YouTube, something like that, where most people are just going to be listening, right? They're not going to be paying anyway. And it's kind of a game of large numbers. So you have to have lots of people who are listening or watching your videos or something like that. And you are hoping that a small percentage of them will decide to pay for membership or course or whatever you're doing. If you're going to those individuals and you speak to 20 people and they say, yeah, it kind of sounds quite good, but I probably wouldn't pay for it, that's probably not enough signal anyway, because realistically, I mean, any podcaster or YouTuber would be absolutely ecstatic if 5% of the people who listened ended up becoming paying customers of theirs. So I think it's a little bit different if you're talking about a very niche product versus a more mass market thing. So to give you a practical example, one of the thing that I tried to start a few years ago was a service in Malta where you could go and you could essentially pay for like a subscription to access different restaurants, and you get like credits to go and you pay, I don't know, €50 a month or something like that, and that would give you, let's say, 2 credits to use at lunchtimes at restaurants. And I went to go and I spoke to lots of potential customers, as in potential diners, let's say, and everyone was like, yeah, that sounds great, brilliant, like I'd love to do that. And then I went to speak to lots of restaurants, and they essentially said, no way, that sounds terrible, because the margins of restaurants are so slim. Here, at least, finding people to come and eat at restaurants is not a problem. And so that was enough of a signal to me that even though there might be even though there might be a certain certain type of customer, i.e. your diners, the people who might pay for it, who would want it. The providers don't want it at all. So I went to speak to like 10 different restaurants. They all gave me a pretty resounding no. And that was a good enough signal for me that there was no point trying to kind of push this ball up a hill. There's been quite a few other instances like that where I've just not seen any kind of positive signals. And I think if you're doing that, it's especially if you're the kind of person who is a perfectionist, especially if you're a developer, it's very easy to get completely bogged down in the weeds of creating your product, thinking I'm going to create the most beautiful thing in the world, and finally when it's ready, the floodgates are going to open and I'm going to be filled with orders. People are going to be buying it from all over the world. And I think if you don't have any of that, those early signs that what you're building is something that people want, then you could end up just wasting a lot of your time and maybe wasting a lot of your money as well.
Yeah, and so would you say this was one of your business failures? Because you said before, I think you said I started many projects, or maybe we talked about this in a previous conversation. You started many business projects that went nowhere.
Yeah, I definitely put that in that category. And I think also the thing that one piece of advice that I would have for people is that lots of people, especially if they're starting out with their first or second idea thing that they want to create for a business, is you can get very attached to a particular idea, and if that doesn't work out, you can sort of think, oh no, like I've done a bad job. Or if you told people about it, then maybe you think it's embarrassing to say, it's not going anywhere, I'm not working on that anymore. Really, it's the best thing you can possibly do is to say, okay, that didn't work, I'm moving on to the next thing. It doesn't matter at all. Not everyone, not every idea is going to be a success. And so it's much more important to kind of move, as you said with the Derek Sivers quote, to move on to the next thing rather than to continue pushing something that probably is not going to work out.
Yeah, I read this has got a name in business. I think it's sunk cost.
Sunk cost fallacy, yeah.
Okay, so when you get attached to whatever you're doing, promoting, because you've invested so much in it, money, time, energy, and then you're like, how come it's not working? This will work with all the money that I've invested. This one day will go somewhere, but actually you're just basically you're just sinking.
Yeah,
right.
I mean, I guess if you know that you're speaking to your actual target customers and you really know the market that you're operating in, and you still don't see any kind of positive signs, then that's the time to move on. But quite often, you're not talking to the right people. Like I give you an example of a friend of mine who created a kind of mini coffee brewer, and it's just a tiny little a kind of cone thing, and he showed it to me, and I was like, I've got no idea. I wouldn't use that because I drink coffee. I like coffee, but I'm not the kind of person who kind of brews my own thing with a nice cone. And I was like, I don't know. I really don't think anyone's gonna buy this. Turns out it's a kind of a massive success. It's if anyone's listening and they like coffee, it's called Aurea, Orea, and he kind of created this knowing that he was exactly the kind of person who's that kind of coffee drinker. And I guess it's a little bit like what I was trying to do with a podcast, thinking this is a product for me. He created a product for himself, and it just so turns out that there's tens of thousands of people all over the world who are the same. So if you're creating something and you really know in your heart of hearts that it's something that like you really, really, really want, and it will be valuable and helpful to your life, then I think perhaps it is worth continuing a little bit more. But a lot of people just get attracted to ideas because they've kind of, it's convenient, or they like that they kind of have put everything on a spreadsheet and made it grow 10% every month, and then suddenly it looks like a very big number at the end, and you get attracted to what attracted to your kind of dream outcome rather than the practicality of the product you're trying to create.
Right. So what's next for you? Like, where is this project going? Do you have any, I don't know, a new vision or new projects, new ideas to keep going with Leonardo English or English? So what's the difference? Leonardo English is the brand,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
English for Curious Minds is the podcast,
It's
the
one of the
actual
podcasts.
product.
Yeah, I mean, I made another fictional podcast earlier this year. It's called
Oh yeah,
it's called
yeah.
Pioneers of the Continuum, and that was great because I collaborated with a bunch of other much more successful than me English language podcasters, and it was an 8-part fictional series about a group of time traveling friends, and I asked a group of English language podcasters if they would kind of guest narrate different characters, and it was great. Yeah, it had some great people doing it. The reaction was fantastic, and I'd like to do more of those. People seem to absolutely love it. But going back to one of your earlier questions, or one of the points we talked about with podcasts, if you don't continuously release new stuff, then Apple Podcasts or Spotify, they will not recommend you to people. And so this was a 8-part series that started and then stopped, and it was a story. It had an end. So I'd just seen the downloads for that were very high at the start, and then they kind of trickled down. There's still hundreds of people listening to it every day, but it's very low compared to what it was before. So I think I'm still kind of figuring out the best way to continue to do that. And we also started doing some kind of more like fictional based courses as well. So kind of allowing people to listen to a fictional story, and then there's a little lesson after every chapter of the story. And I released the first one of those in September, I think, and that was a big success. So people really liked that, and I got, I think, one already written, writing another one at the moment, and hopefully we'll start doing maybe like 4 or 5 of those per year. So that's the current plan, is just continue to make interesting stuff, continue to make improvements to the product, and hopefully continue to be an interesting way for people to, I say continue their journey with English, because I think it can be disingenuous to be like to learn English, because the listeners of the show, they've already learnt English to a certain degree, and it's more a case of continuing that sometimes painful but lifelong journey with a language.
Because I know that once people have bought from you, then it's easier for them. I mean, that is an indication that they trust you, and then it's easier for them to buy again if you make another product or another service. I'm wondering do you get feedback? Do you intentionally get feedback from your audience? So, like, do you ever say something like, okay, what should I create next? Or what do you think of what I created? Should I make more of this? Do you ever ask for that kind of feedback?
Yes, I do, and I allow people who pay members to request topics. So we actually make topics that people say. I think that, so this might sound like a really selfish or arrogant thing to say, but I try not to create topics just based on what I know people would like or what they would search for, because I think that can be a slippery slope towards getting to like, the 10 top things that non-native speakers, you need to fix about their pronunciation, and very kind of clickbaity stuff.
Yeah.
So my intention with what I'm creating is always to be like, create something that's actually quite, hard content that is not necessarily a really easy story to get into, or easy idea to kind of digest, because I think people really appreciate depth of content, and in a world where there's you can be people have got very short attention spans, and everyone's saying put things on TikTok and YouTube Shorts, and create shorts about like the top 10 reasons you shouldn't say I'm fine. You should say whatever, like I'm splendid, good sir, or all those kind of things. I think if everyone's doing that, there's probably more room for content that has a greater depth, that's got a better respect for people's attention, and for people's intelligence. So I want to kind of keep on creating what I think I would like to listen to, rather than sort of trying to go down the route of thinking what are the top search terms for English learners, because that is, I think it's just a very slippery slope, and you end up competing with lots of people who you don't really want to be competing with. That's my view, at least.
Yeah, and those people are really, like, they get a lot of engagement. I wonder, those Instagrammers, TikTokers who teach. I don't know. I don't even know if I should use this term, but they send. They make these videos where they teach one word or 10 different ways to say something. But this, not just in language learning, there are a lot of creators who make this kind of videos, like physiotherapists, for example. This is a marketing strategy to me. Like it should be, it must be. So I show the world what I know about the subject matter, and then they will check my channel and check out my courses. Maybe it's just a marketing strategy. I'm just wondering. What do you think?
I think it certainly is. Yeah. So you do something that's enough of a hook, that gets people thinking, okay, that person looks interesting. Then they dive in, and clearly, you start getting emails from them, and then promotions for their course and all that kind of stuff. But I think, it's there's certain types. If we stick within the realm of like English as a second language, or even any kind of language teaching, really, there are people who are making that kind of clickbaity type content, which I'm sure does really well on YouTube, and brings lots of new subscribers in and things like that. But given how commoditized that kind of content is, and how it's kind of entertainment or edutainment. I think I heard someone using that phrase the other day. It's the kind of thing that doesn't have as much personality necessarily, and probably quite easy to replace. And so you're competing with lots and lots of people if you're doing the same kind of top 10 mistakes that non-native speakers non-native speakers make. But I think if you're suitably different, and you're saying, I don't know, these are the top 5 words that that Polish speakers make in medical English, then at least it's like, okay, right, this is clearly, if you are an aspiring doctor from Poland, then like, okay, this person is exactly the sort of person who I can follow. And even though that person's audience might be a lot smaller, at least that the audience is highly engaged, because that person is delivering like really good content for what they're looking for. So I just started learning Swedish, and I get like very, very basic. So I imagine, like lots of language learners, one of my first stops was to look on YouTube and see what kind of things there were. And yeah, I found this channel that is run by what seems to be two kind of young guys, and they just got a really kind of nice, friendly way of explaining stuff that I liked. And it seemed like they were doing some of that more kind of clickbaity stuff, but because it's Swedish, it's clearly the market for people learning Swedish is a lot smaller. It's probably also a lot more, there's a lot higher like purchase intent, I guess, because it's like this is probably a problem that someone is facing rather than just a general, I should probably watch a video in English type thing. And yeah, I kind of found the content. I think I saw one of the perhaps more clickbaity things about life in Sweden, or top 10 mistakes that someone makes when they move to Sweden, that kind of thing. And then I went in and I bought the course that they made. And I also bought that because I liked the people. They seemed like they weren't sort of particularly pushy. They were making this stuff, but it seemed like good stuff, and I'm super happy with it. It's called Say It in Swedish. I seem like I'm giving lots of promotions here, but I've got no affiliation with any of these things other than it's a good course.
Before you said, you said something before. I can't remember. I wanted to ask you a question. I can't remember. It will come, I hope. So I have, I did some research, and I wanted to ask you this question. In a previous interview, you said, my best paid job ever was a busker, you said.
Yeah.
I traveled...
Okay. Yeah. That is still my best paid job ever, I think. Yeah.
Okay. So you said, I traveled around northern France and Belgium when I was 18, playing the bagpipes. I once made 200 euros in 40 minutes.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, why did you not pursue that career as a busker? Because clearly you were good at that.
I guess it's not particularly sustainable.
Okay.
Plus also it's if you ever tried to play the bagpipes, your lips get kind of sore after playing for more than about 45 minutes. So that is about the most you can do in a few hours. But no, it was a very fun experience, and I think if anyone has, if there is a skill that you can use to do other fun things, whether that's a musical instrument or whether that's a language that you can teach to someone and you can go to that country and you can use things that you might have been lucky. Maybe you were lucky enough to be born in an English-speaking country or Italian-speaking country, or Italy, I guess I should say, or you've learned the bagpipes or whatever it might be. Then, if you can use those skills to your advantage, then I think that's you're in a lucky position. You play the drums, I realized.
Yeah, I used to. Then I stopped. I actually stopped when I moved to London. I went to London with the idea of becoming, also a musician and playing gigs around London, and that's when I stopped, actually. Because I didn't have a room for my drum kit. It's not like a guitar that you can bring with you wherever you go. So I had to stop. That thing that I wanted to ask you. So you said that in the future you're going to release some fiction stories, some episodes where you tell fiction stories, and you're going to write those yourself.
In fact, they're mainly written by my content writer called Emil, who's an amazing guy, lives in Malaysia, and has been writing quite a lot of stuff for the blog, and it turns out is a very good fiction writer as well. So he wrote most of Pioneers of the Continuum. He wrote the previous one that we released, The Mules. He wrote another one called Students of Murder. We're working on one at the moment, which is it's quite a fun one about I don't want to give too much away, but it's about a dictator of a Central Asian country who spent time at being educated in a English private school. So that
Pol Pot.
no, completely fictional.
Okay, sorry. Yeah. Well, maybe it's inspired by Pol Pot in Cambodia.
Yeah. There's definitely some inspiration that comes from there.
Okay. Yeah, because I asked you that question about whether or not you write those fiction stories. Because I just wanted to know if you're into writing at all. So if you like um, writing blogs or journaling, are you into writing at all, or
Yeah, I mean,
would you
I
say?
so I write all of the episodes that we make. So they're like, I guess they're about 3,000 words each. So just by doing kind of the episodes that we make, it's like two relatively chunky stories, I guess, non-fictional stories that I write every week. I think I wrote the first 100 or so blog posts on the
Wow.
website. I enjoy writing. It's the reason I don't write that I haven't been mainly writing the fictional ones is a question of time. I wish I would be able to write more of them, and I probably give myself too much credit by saying I'm like a co-author, but it's more a question of we work on the idea together, and Emil goes and kind of actually writes the majority of the script, and then we flesh it out and make it into an audio drama.
Cool. 3,000 words. So each episode is around 3,000 words.
Yeah,
And you release 2 episodes a week.
exactly. Yeah. So one episode
It's
is
a lot.
is the released on the free feed available to everyone, and people who are paying members get another one. So the Friday one is free to all, and the Tuesday one is a member only one, and then the members also get access to the interactive transcripts and subtitles and study packs and all that kind of stuff. But yeah,
Fantastic.
it is quite a lot, and scripting every episode is tough, and I know that having on one level it's much easier than an interview style podcast, because you're only depending on yourself, and you don't have to do
Yeah.
research on the guest, and there's it's
Well, if you're a good podcaster, I think you do some research.
yeah. Sorry, but I mean, as a
Maybe I'm not one of those. I don't know. I sometimes, I research the guest.
no, sorry.
But
So
I see what you
to
mean. Yeah.
clarify, if you're doing a scripted one, you're not researching on guests. You're just researching on whatever the subject is.
Yeah.
Versus if
Yeah.
you're doing an interview, then you've got to do all the guest research. You've got to do all the preparation. You've got to make sure that the guest, that they don't have horns beeping in the background like me. Or children crying or that kind of stuff. So there's obviously another additional level of complication, whereas for scripted ones, it's just a case of making sure that you have written a compelling script and then delivering that in an engaging way. But it does take time, because every single word is scripted, and quite often as I'm reading something out, I'm like, it doesn't sound so good, so I have to go back and write it again, and it's it can take quite a while. So yeah,
It's a full-time job for you, right? Because if you don't have have you got a big team apart from your ghostwriter, your Emily?
Emil. So we've got an editor, an assistant, and a guy who creates all the vocabulary definitions. So it's a team of part-time team of 4 or 5.
Nice. I have one last question that just came to mind now. If you don't know who to help, so if you want to help somebody, you have some skills, and you feel that you can help someone, but you don't know who this person is. I'm asking you this question because this is me. Okay, it's me right now. So I could help learners of English speak better. I could help them write better, because I love writing. I could help teachers of English because I have enough experience and I'm doing a master's degree, so I can work as a teacher trainer as well. I have enough experience and qualifications to do that. Or I can just help companies with their content and create content in English. There are so many options. What questions should one, and I'm sure there are other people, other freelancers, solopreneurs out there that they might be confused. So, what question do you think, if there are any, should one ask himself to find clarity? Maybe it's too hard of a question. It's a question that requires a little bit of thinking, but I don't know if you have an answer. I'd be happy to hear it.
So, if I've understood the question properly, I think I would think about what is the most burning problem that you are uniquely qualified to solve.
Yes.
So, to kind of talk through some of the options that you mentioned there, you said you could be a content writer for businesses. You could teach people how to better teach English. You could teach people how to speak English better. I can't remember what the first one you said was.
Right.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
Right. Better.
Okay. So you have all of these different qualities that you could use in whatever way. I would perhaps think of what is the kind of what is your unique perspective that you are uniquely qualified to do in a way that no one else is. I'm sure there are tens of thousands of teacher trainers and clearly a similar number of content writers and things like that. But if you're completely niching down and saying what is it that you're uniquely capable of doing? Is it to do with your experience, kind of going from? I read your book last night actually. Is it your experience going from? It's very good. Is it like going from the kind of working in? I was trying to guess what cafe it would have been. I think it might have been
Pret-a-manger.
Is it
yes.
Pret-a-manger? Oh, good. Okay. Going from kind of Pret to like extreme competency in English, teaching people along the way. Maybe you kind of you lace on top of that the fact that you're Italian, and I imagine that there's probably less than 100 people, fewer than 100 people in Italy who might have done exactly the same thing as you. So, what can you do with that? I mean, maybe there is some kind of unique problem that means you're qualified to solve. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe it's something to do with, I don't know, kind of moving from the EU to Australia. I don't know exactly what it might be, but I would perhaps think of what are the skills that you have that very few other people have. And I'm sure it sounds like there are many there. And where does that fit in with like a problem that a business or an individual has, as a problem that is so acute that people are willing to pay for it, and then if you have the luxury of doing this as well, adding on, something that you'll be happy to commit to for 5 or 10 years or whatever it is, because I imagine if it is, just translating pharmaceutical information from Italian to English, maybe that is your passion, maybe it's not. But I think if you find something that you are uniquely good at doing, but you hate doing it, then that's not gonna end well, even if you might find it to be, lucrative at the start. So I think that's what I would kind of focus on. Have 3 different areas. What are you uniquely good at? What are you uniquely kind of capable to do? What do people or companies, what are they willing to pay for? And then what do you like doing? There's a Japanese word for that, isn't it? Ikagi? Is that right? Am I going?
Yeah.
Yeah. I thought I was going to mispronounce
Nice.
that. Apologies to any Japanese speakers, but
Japanese speakers. Yeah. What's it again?
I think it is
Ikagi.
Ikage. Yeah, I think that's right. Ikagi. I'm going to mispronounce it, but I C
Okay, it's
A.
that one.
So ICIGAI. Yeah. So
Cool.
that would be it.
Thank you. This is great advice. Something that I need to reflect on. Um, is there anything that you would like to chat about that maybe I haven't asked you?
I don't think so. Not unless there's anything that you think would be particularly that if someone was a listener to the show and they might be thinking, I wish Fabio had asked him this. But I can't think of anything that immediately springs to mind. Good work bringing up the bagpipes. I feel like that does seem to have come up in the few episodes that I have done. I seem to be getting known for being Mr. Bagpipes, but it's
Yeah,
fun.
no, I found it. I found it on Medium, and there's a picture of you where you look like really young, like you're a. I don't know if you're in your twenties in that picture,
I think I
but
was I think I was 18 in that one.
oh wow,
I think that's
okay,
also one of
okay, and
the
you were already yeah.
reasons maybe that I didn't pursue it, because I think people are more happy to give you money if you look young. Also, I look young for I think I always look younger than my actual age. So I think when I was 18, I think people looked at me and thought I was about 12. So they were very happy to give money to what seemed like a destitute child at that point in time.
Okay. Thank you, Alastair. Where can people find your podcast? So we're now talking about how to get in touch with you.
Sure. So if you are a non-native English speaker and you like to improve your English in what might be a more interesting way, then you can just search for English Learning for Curious Minds on your favorite podcast app. And if you're a native English speaker and want to get in touch, then just you can email hi@leonardoenglish.com, and that will come straight to my inbox, and I will be very happy to hear from you. But even if
Fantastic.
you're
It's also
even if you're a non-native speaker, I should say.
I was about to say that. Yeah.
Not to try and form some kind of native or non-native apartheid, but yeah, more a case of if you're a native speaker. Actually, to be fair, I do get some emails from native speakers saying they listen to it as well. So
Yeah, this is exactly what I was about to say, because it is interesting whether you're a native speaker or not. The content of your podcast is really interesting. It's something that, um, I mean, it's interesting to a wider audience. So congratulations! It's a great product. I think it's a great
well,
podcast,
that's
great product.
it's very kind of you to say.
All right, Alastair, thank you. Thank you for joining the show, and I'm looking forward to listening to your next episode, especially the podium of the no
Pi-
pen. I don't know. It's a Latin word.
Pioneers of the Continuum.
Okay, that one. Thank you, Alastair, and we'll see you soon again. Probably. We'll see.
Thanks so much, Fabio. Bye.
Bye bye.